The heavy iron-carbon alloy chains, thick as a starship's primary coolant pipes, strained and groaned in agonizing metallic protest. The beast pulled against them with impossible, unrelenting kinetic force. Vrek, the Grand Alpha of the Orion Syndicate's elite hunting guild, wiped a streak of dark, acidic blood from his heavy, armored visor. He was a veteran of 1,000 worlds. He had hunted massive void krakens in the deep nebulas. He had wrestled subterranean tectonic worms on fractured moons. But he had never in his long, violent life faced anything as purely, terrifyingly aggressive as the creature currently chained to the exact center of his reinforced cargo deck. It was a Solarian sun lion, a purely biological apex nightmare from a deeply restricted, hyperlethal quarantine world. To any human, its physical form would be hauntingly familiar, for massive, heavily muscled limbs, brilliant golden fur that seemed to absorb the dim emergency lighting, and a thick, dark mane of coarse, wire-like hair. But this was no Earth animal. It was the size of a heavily armored military transport vehicle. Its fangs were the length and sharpness of serrated plasma-daggers. Its thick mane was naturally interwoven with a biological metallic compound, rendering the beast practically immune to standard kinetic weapons fire. And its glowing golden eyes burned with an unyielding, primal rage that profoundly unsettled every heavily armed alien mercenary standing in room. It was a magnificent, perfectly evolved biological killing machine, and it was completely out of its mind. It is a lost cause. Vrek clicked his heavy mandibles in utter, exhausted disgust, slowly raising his heavy plasma execution rifle. 3 standard cycles we have desperately tried to break its spirit. 3 cycles, and it has killed 4 of my absolute best animal handlers. The beast let out a low, vibrating roar that physically shook the dust from the ceiling panels and caused the alien vitals monitors to spike. Vrek's second-in-command, a nervous avian alien named Kor, fluffed his dark feathers in sheer, unadulterated terror. It does not feel any fear, Captain. It only feels hate. We cannot possibly sell this monster to the underground fighting pits. It will simply slaughter the audience before the matches even begin. Then we terminate it right now. Vrek snarled aggressively, manually adjusting the execution rifle's power output to absolute maximum yield. A terrible shame. The underground bounty on a live, breathing sun lion would have easily bought us a brand new starship. He aimed the glowing blue barrel squarely between the massive creature's furious golden eyes. The lion didn't flinch. It bared its terrifying fangs, fully prepared to die, while tearing the entire ship apart. Put the rifle down, Vrek. The voice was completely calm, unarmored, distinctly human. Vrek lowered his heavy weapon a fraction of an inch, glaring violently over his heavy shoulder plating. Standing casually in the doorway of the cargo bay was Jax. He was the starship's newly hired mechanic, a Category 2 species from a highly restricted, infamous death world called Earth. He was barely half Vrek's towering height, completely lacking natural armor, venom glands, or kinetic shielding. He was wearing stained engineering coveralls and casually holding a simple, solid steel hydro spanner. "Get out of here, fragile human," Vrek growled, his voice vibrating with lethal, unquestionable authority. "This is not a simple engine malfunction. This is a sanctioned execution. The beast is utterly feral." "It's not feral," Jax said quietly, taking a slow, highly deliberate step into the cargo bay. "It's just terrified, and you're shining a high-yield plasma emitter right into its highly sensitive retinas." The alien hunters burst into a chorus of harsh clicking, mocking laughter. "Terrified." Kor squawked in absolute disbelief. "It tore off Handler Gax's entire arm yesterday. It is a mindless, violent monster. It is a complete lost cause." "There are absolutely no lost causes," Jax whispered, his dark human eyes locking entirely onto the massive, golden-maned alien lion. "Only deeply misunderstood ones." Jax casually dropped his heavy hydro spanner onto the cold metal deck. The loud clang echoed sharply through the utterly silent room. He didn't draw a kinetic weapon. He didn't activate a personal energy shield. He simply began walking directly toward the highly dangerous containment ring. "Humans, stop immediately," Vrek commanded, genuinely shocked by the sheer suicidal madness unfolding before his eyes. "The primary containment field is down. Those chains will not hold if it lunges. It will snap your incredibly fragile spine completely in half." Jax completely ignored the towering alien captain. He crossed the invisible threshold into the creature's primary lethal strike zone. The Solarian sun lion instantly stopped thrashing. Its massive ears flattened sharply against its thick skull. It lowered its heavy, muscular shoulders, dropping into a terrifying predatory pounce stance. A deep, heavy, rumbling growl began to violently vibrate within its massive chest cavity, a sound so incredibly deep and powerful it disrupted the starship's artificial gravity sensors. The apex beast was preparing to strike. It was preparing to completely obliterate the unarmored primate calmly walking toward it. But the fragile human didn't freeze in paralyzing fear. He didn't run away. He stopped exactly 3 feet away from the creature's massive, razor-sharp claws. The room went dead silent. The alien hunters held their breath, actively waiting for the inevitable, brutal spray of human blood. Jax took a deep breath, slowly raised his bare, unarmored hand, and spoke to the cosmic nightmare. "Hey there, big guy," Jax whispered softly. The heavy iron chain snapped tight as the massive lion suddenly lunged forward. The heavy iron chain snapped tight with a deafening metallic screech as the massive Solarian sun lion lunged violently forward. On the upper observation deck, the heavily armed alien hunters flinched aggressively. Vrek, the towering Syndicate captain, instinctively raised his high-yield plasma rifle, fully expecting the fragile, unarmored human to be instantly pulverized into a fine crimson mist. The kinetic force of a sun lion's strike could crush a reinforced military bulkhead. A Category 2 primate from a restricted death world didn't stand a microscopic chance. But the brutal, blood-soaked impact never actually happened. The colossal beast froze, absolutely still, mere inches away from Jax's face. Its massive, razor-sharp fangs, dripping with highly corrosive saliva, hovered right in front of the human's unblinking eyes. The sheer, biological heat radiating from the alien predator's massive muscular body was completely suffocating. The entire cargo beheld its collective breath. Why hadn't it bitten the human's head off? Jax didn't flinch. He didn't take a single step backward. "That's it," Jax whispered, his voice impossibly calm and steady in the face of absolute cosmic terror. "Get it all out. I know you are hurting." The human slowly, deliberately extended his bare, unarmored right hand. The movement was incredibly smooth, lacking the sharp, jerky motions of absolute primal panic that prey species always exhibited. The massive alien lion watched the approaching hand with glowing golden eyes, its heavy chest rapidly expanding and contracting. It let out a low, terrifyingly deep rumble that violently vibrated the starship's floor grating. It was a clear, unmistakable warning. Captain Vrek, Kale, the nervous avian lieutenant, squawked quietly from the rear of the bay. "The beast is preparing to completely devour him. We must open fire immediately." "Nobody fires," Jax commanded, not even bothering to look back at the heavily armed mercenaries. His voice was suddenly laced with a sharp, dangerous, deeply authoritative edge that completely contradicted his frail, biological classification. "If you fire a plasma weapon right now, the kinetic energy discharge will instantly panic him. And if he completely panics, those heavy carbon chains will not hold him for another 10 seconds. Vrek clicked his massive mandibles in sheer, frustrated disbelief. The unarmored human was actively protecting the monster that was about to kill him. Human. It is a mindless, hyper-aggressive killing machine. It does not understand your primitive death world pack-bonding vocalizations. He understands perfectly, Jax replied quietly. The fragile human's bare fingers gently made contact with the massive creature's heavy, metallic-laced golden mane. The alien hunters collectively gasped in absolute horror. The Solarian sun lion violently stiffened. It bared its terrifying serrated fangs, a deep, guttural hiss escaping its throat. But it did not strike. "Look at his massive paws, Vrek," Jax said, his voice echoing coldly through the utterly silent cargo bay. "Look at the heavy iron shackles. They are completely scorched. You have been using standard electroshock containment fields on him, haven't you? It is standard Syndicate protocol for highly aggressive biological acquisitions." Vrek defended himself, gripping his heavy weapon tighter. "It is the only logical way to subdue a predator of that massive size." "It is incredibly stupid," Jax retorted, gently stroking the beast's thick, coarse fur. "Sun lions possess highly sensitive, localized electroreceptors in their lower extremities to track tectonic movements on their home world. By constantly shocking his primary paws, you aren't just causing him intense pain, you are actively blinding his primary biological sensory network. He is lashing out because he is completely agonizingly blind to his immediate environment." The towering alien captain fell entirely silent. The Vanguard Science Academies had completely missed that incredibly subtle biological detail. How did a simple, unarmored human mechanic know this? "On Earth," Jax whispered, leaning his incredibly fragile head against the massive predator's heavily armored skull, "we share our incredibly chaotic, deeply violent world with apex predators. We learned a very long time ago that you do not ever try to break a king." The massive alien lion's low, terrifying growls slowly began to change. The violent, aggressive frequency dropped into a deep, rhythmic, rattling purr that shook the room. "You have to earn his respect," Jax finished, and then the human reached directly into his stained engineering coveralls, pulled out a highly illegal magnetic lockpick, and jammed it straight into the beast's primary heavy containment collar. The locking mechanism clicked loudly, echoing like a terrifying gunshot across the room. The massive, incredibly heavy iron collar instantly disengaged, violently crashing straight down onto the solid cold steel floor. The deafening, metallic crash of the heavy containment collar hitting the solid steel deck echoed like a localized bomb blast. For exactly 2 seconds, the entire cargo bay was completely, agonizingly frozen in time. The alien mercenaries stopped breathing. Commander Vrek's mandibles locked in sheer, unadulterated horror. The unarmored human had just completely unshackled a Class 9 biological nightmare. Then absolute, unfiltered chaos violently erupted. "Fire! Open fire immediately!" Vrek roared, his alien voice cracking with pure, primal panic. He violently leveled his heavy plasma execution rifle directly at Jax and the beast. All around the upper observation deck, a dozen elite Syndicate hunters frantically spooled up their heavy rotary cannons. The blinding, highly lethal blue glow of charging plasma completely illuminated the darkroom. The massive Solarian sun lion physically reacted to the sudden surge of aggressive kinetic energy. Freed from the blinding, agonizing electro-shocks of its heavy collar, its highly advanced biological sensory network instantly rebooted. It could finally see clearly. It could feel the microscopic vibrations of the terrified alien's heartbeats through the solid steel floor grating. The colossal apex predator let out a thunderous, earth-shattering roar of pure, unleashed dominance. It violently whipped its massive, muscular body forward, placing its heavily armored frame directly beside the incredibly fragile human. "Jax, get out of the way!" Kor squawked desperately from the catwalk, his avian feathers standing entirely on end. "It is going to completely tear you in half." But Jax didn't move a single inch. In a display of sheer, unpredictable human madness that fundamentally broke every single alien survival protocol in the Vanguard databases, Jax completely turned his back on the towering 400-pound alien lion. He faced the heavily armed Syndicate hunters, slowly raising his bare, unarmored hands in a calm, highly deliberate motion. "Lower your weapons, Vrek," Jax commanded. His voice wasn't a panicked scream. It was a cold, incredibly dangerous whisper that somehow cut entirely through the blaring sirens and the deafening hum of charging plasma rifles. "You insane primate!" Vrek shrieked, his heavy finger trembling violently on the primary trigger. You have doomed this entire vessel. That monster is completely feral. It will slaughter every single biological entity on this ship. He's not a monster, Jax replied, not breaking eye contact with the towering alien captain. He is a king, and you have been torturing him. Behind the incredibly fragile category too human, the massive alien beast slowly ceased its aggressive, thrashing movements. The Solarian sun lion possessed a highly evolved, profoundly intelligent cerebral cortex. For 3 standard cycles, it had known nothing but agonizing electro-shocks, blinding pain, and the bitter acidic taste of alien hunters' blood. It had fully expected this tiny, unarmored creature to attack it. Instead, the human had willingly walked into its lethal strike zone, completely disarmed its agonizing restraints, and was now actively shielding the massive predator from a dozen glowing plasma rifles with his own soft, incredibly vulnerable flesh. The alien lion slowly lowered its massive, heavy head. It took one silent, fluid step forward, its massive claws clicking softly against the metal deck. The alien hunters violently braced themselves for the inevitable, brutal slaughter. But the beast didn't leap toward the catwalks. It didn't lash out at the human. The colossal, highly lethal cosmic predator deliberately positioned its massive, heavily armored shoulder entirely in front of Jax. It let out a low, bone-rattling hiss directed squarely at the heavily armed alien mercenaries, completely shielding the fragile human behind its own indestructible, metallic-laced golden mane. Vrek's plasma rifle slowly dipped in absolute, mind-shattering shock. This was biologically impossible. A Solarian sun lion, the most fiercely independent and hyper-aggressive apex predator in the known galaxy, was actively pack-bonding with a deeply inferior, unarmored primate. Why? Vrek whispered, his entire galactic worldview completely shattering in real time. Why is it protecting you? Because humans are not normal, Jax said coldly, a deeply predatory shadow crossing his normally calm face. We don't just survive the terrors of the dark void. We make them our family. Before Vrek could even process the terrifying implications of the human's deeply unsettling evolutionary empathy, the starship's primary AI violently interjected. Critical alert. Class 9 biological threat unshackled in Cargo Bay 4. The cold, synthetic voice echoed loudly over the blaring red sirens. Containment breach detected. Initiating immediate incineration protocol. Heavy, blast-proof titanium shutters slammed violently down over the observation deck windows, physically separating Vrek and his hunters from the human and the beast. Captain, the automated defense grid is locking them in. Kale shrieked. The room is preparing to flood with superheated plasma. Jax slowly turned around, looking up at the massive, glowing thermal vents violently opening in the ceiling directly above them. The temperature in the room was already rapidly spiking toward completely lethal levels. The massive alien lion looked down at the fragile human, letting out a low, questioning rumble. Jax simply smiled, calmly picking his heavy solid steel hydrospanner back up from the deck. Don't worry, buddy. Jax whispered to the colossal beast. We're going to completely dismantle this ship. The ambient temperature inside Cargo Bay 4 violently skyrocketed within mere seconds. The heavy titanium floor, grating beneath Jax's boots, began to aggressively radiate a blistering, intensely lethal heat. High above them, 4 massive primary thermal vents glowed with a terrifying, blinding orange intensity. The starship's automated defense grid was mercilessly preparing to flood the entire sealed chamber with completely unfiltered, superheated plasma. In exactly 90 seconds, the internal temperature would rival the core of a dying star. Anything organic would be instantly and completely vaporized. The massive Solarian sun lion paced frantically in the suffocating heat. Its glowing golden eyes tracked the violently glowing vents, letting out deep, chest-rattling roars of primal defiance. It was a king of a hyperlethal death world, but no biological armor could withstand absolute molecular incineration. It turned its massive, heavy head toward Jax, letting out a low, questioning whine. The fierce, terrifying apex predator of the cosmos, was actively looking to the fragile, unarmored category too human for survival. "I see them, buddy," Jax coughed, wiping a thick stream of stinging sweat from his eyes. His dark engineering coveralls, heavily embroidered with the faded Frontline insignia of his old human shipyard, were already beginning to smoke. "The primary AI is completely locked down, but it's just a machine. And humans love breaking machines." Jax tightly gripped his heavy, solid steel hydrospanner. He rapidly scanned the violently glowing room, his human eyes locking onto a heavily shielded maintenance panel located exactly 20 feet up the sheer, completely flat steel bulkhead. It was the localized manual thermal regulator. If he could violently smash that specific panel and physically invert the polarity of the magnetic containment coils, he could force the superheated plasma to violently backfire entirely into the starship's primary energy grid. There was only one massive problem. The sheer steel wall offered absolutely zero handholds for a fragile primate. And Jax did not possess Vanguard anti-gravity boots. "Hey!" Jax shouted over the deafening, blaring red sirens, waving his bare hand to catch the massive lion's attention. "I need you to listen to me. I need to get up there. Right now." He aggressively pointed his hydrospanner directly at the high-up maintenance panel, then firmly patted his own chest and pointed forcefully to the alien beast's massive, heavily armored back. It was a desperate, wildly unpredictable cross-species communication attempt. A deeply complex tactical maneuver that required absolute, unquestioning mutual trust. The colossal, 400-pound predator paused. Its highly advanced cerebral cortex rapidly processed the fragile human's desperate gestures. It looked at the glowing panel, then back at Jax. The heavy, metallic-laced golden mane violently flared outward. The beast let out a thunderous, affirmative grunt and immediately slammed its massive body directly against a sheer steel bulkhead. It lowered its heavy, muscular shoulders, casting a brief, expectant glance backward at the human. On the observation deck, watching through the heavily tinted thermal glass, Captain Vrek's mandibles completely dropped in sheer, unadulterated disbelief. By the ancestors, the beast is actively taking orders from the primate. It is acting as a tactical transport. Jax didn't hesitate for a single microsecond. He sprinted forcefully forward, using his heavy engineering boots to violently launch his fragile body directly onto the massive alien lion's back. He grabbed handfuls of the creature's thick metallic mane, desperately pulling himself up. The beast didn't snap. It didn't flinch. Instead, the Solarian sun lion violently reared up on its incredibly powerful hind legs, easily stretching its massive frame high up against the scorching metal wall. Jax was instantly thrust 20 feet into the blistering, suffocating air, bringing him perfectly face-to-face with the heavily shielded thermal panel. The metal casing was already glowing cherry red. "Hold completely steady," Jax roared, completely ignoring the agonizing, burning heat actively searing the skin on his bare, unarmored forearms. He violently swung his heavy hydrospanner, brutally smashing the thick steel casing over and over with terrified, hysterical human strength. The heavy panel finally shattered, exposing a violently sparking cluster of thick fiber optic cables and glowing magnetic coils. The ship's AI instantly recognized the manual intrusion. The blaring countdown timer on the main screen suddenly jumped from 40 seconds directly down to 10. The system is aggressively accelerating the purge. Kor shrieked from the upper deck, his feathers visibly smoking. Jax let out a primal human roar, violently plunging his bare, completely unshielded hand directly into the sparking high-voltage circuitry. He grabbed the primary magnetic containment coil and brutally, forcefully ripped it entirely out of its housing, violently jamming it backward into the primary plasma feed line. The entire starship violently shuddered. A blinding, thunderous shockwave of pure kinetic energy violently reversed back into the ceiling vents. Instead of completely flooding the cargo bay, the superheated plasma violently backfired directly into the starship's primary internal defense grid. Every single automated turret, heavy containment field, and electronic lock on the entire Vanguard vessel simultaneously exploded in a massive shower of highly lethal electrical sparks. The heavy titanium blast doors of cargo bay instantly lost all power. They slowly, heavily groaned open, revealing the dark corridor beyond. Jax heavily dropped back down to the smoking metal deck, gasping violently for air, his human hands scorched and bleeding. The massive Solarian sun lion stepped protectively over him, letting out a terrifying, triumphant roar that completely shattered the remaining thermal glass on the observation deck. They were out, and now the human and the king were going hunting. The thick, acrid black smoke poured violently out of cargo bay and into the sterile, heavily polished corridors of the Vanguard starship. The heavy titanium blast doors had completely failed, leaving the path to the upper decks wide open. On the observation catwalk, Commander Vrek and his elite Syndicate hunters frantically pulled the triggers of their heavy rotary cannons. Click, click, click. The violent, superheated plasma backfire that Jax had manually triggered hadn't just completely destroyed the ship's automated defense grid. The massive electromagnetic pulse had entirely fried the energy cells of every single localized plasma weapon on the vessel. The heavily armored alien mercenaries, feared across a dozen star systems, were now completely disarmed. Down in the smoldering ruins of the cargo bay, the massive Solarian sun lion stepped heavily through the smoke. It was a vision of pure, unleashed biological terror. Its thick, metallic-laced golden mane was covered in dark soot, and its glowing golden eyes locked onto the terrified aliens above. It let out a thunderous, earth-shattering roar that physically buckled the remaining thermal glass. For 3 standard cycles, these heavily armored hunters had tortured it. They had bound it in agonizing iron chains and blinded it with electro-shocks. The apex predator's highly advanced cerebral cortex demanded absolute, brutal retribution. Its massive, razor-sharp claws dug deeply into the metal deck, preparing to violently leap up to the catwalk and slaughter every single biological entity in the room. "Whoa, easy, big guy." Jax's incredibly calm, unarmored voice cut through the heavy, terrifying tension like a blade. The fragile human engineer stepped casually out of the thick smoke, resting his bare, severely scorched hand gently onto the massive alien lion's heavy shoulder. The colossal beast instantly froze. It snapped its massive head toward Jax, letting out a low, questioning whine. The primal urge to kill was overwhelmingly strong, but the deeply ingrained, newly formed pack bond with the human was infinitely stronger. "I know," Jax whispered softly, gently scratching the thick, coarse fur behind the massive predator's heavily armored ears. "I know they hurt you, but we don't slaughter unarmed prisoners. That's not what we do." The towering, 400-pound cosmic nightmare let out a deep, vibrating sigh. It slowly lowered its massive frame, aggressively rubbing its heavy, terrifying skull affectionately against the incredibly fragile human's chest. It began to purr. The deep, rhythmic acoustic vibration shook the floorboards. On the catwalk, Vrek collapsed to his heavy, armored knees in sheer, mind-shattering disbelief. His multifaceted alien eyes were wide with a terror he had never known. A Category 2 primate had just casually stopped a Class 9 biological killing machine with a simple vocal command and a gentle touch. What are you?" Vrek whispered, his voice completely hollow. "No biological species in the known universe possesses that level of evolutionary empathy. You are actively controlling a monster." "He isn't a monster," Jax replied coldly, looking up at the terrified alien captain. The human's dark eyes held absolutely zero sympathy. "He's just a very good boy who was treated incredibly badly." Jax casually wiped the dark grease and soot from his heavy engineering coveralls, making sure the faded Frontline shipyard insignia on his chest was clearly visible. He picked up his heavy solid steel hydro spanner from the scorched deck. "Here is exactly how this is going to work, Vrek," Jax commanded, his voice echoing with undeniable lethal authority. "Your ship's primary propulsion is still fully intact. But I have completely locked you out of a navigation mainframe. You and your elite hunters have exactly 3 standard minutes to evacuate to the secondary escape pods before I manually vent the entire upper deck into the absolute vacuum of deep space. You are stealing my starship? Vrek shrieked, his avian lieutenant corps actively sobbing in the background. I'm repossessing it. Jax corrected him with a cold, predatory smile. Consider it standard payment for the emotional damages you inflicted on my new pet. The massive Solarian sun lion let out a deeply aggressive affirmative growl, baring its serrated, venom-dripping fangs at the trembling aliens. It was the absolute ultimate HFY power play. The Vanguard Syndicate had brought a fragile human mechanic aboard to fix their engines. Instead, the human had completely dismantled their heavily armed crew, survived a lethal plasma purge, and successfully pack-bonded with the most dangerous biological predator in the sector. 3 minutes later, a dozen Vanguard escape pods violently jettisoned into the dark, freezing void of space. Jax stood completely alone on the primary command bridge of the massive starship. The vast, infinite expanse of the cosmos reflected brightly in the large observation windows. The heavy, rhythmic thud of massive padded paws echoed softly behind him. The colossal golden beast walked up to the command chair, resting its incredibly heavy, armored head gently onto Jax's lap. The human smiled, running his bare hands through the beast's thick metallic mane. The aliens thought Earth was just a restricted death world full of fragile, soft primates. They were about to learn that humans were the undisputed apex predators of the galaxy, not because of our fangs or our armor, but because we could look into the absolute terrifying darkness of the universe, find the most dangerous, hyperlethal monster hiding in the shadows, and simply call it a good boy.